So 3.782 is what we're going to do today, and I want you to start by doing these two problems. Remember, get the absolute value part by itself, and then you have two equations that you're working on. Every time it breaks up into two. So complete that and we'll check them tomorrow. So 3.7.2 or part 2, absolute value equations and inequalities. I wrote here less than because the symbol is less than. I wrote the word "and" in capital because this is going to be an "and." So we still break these up into two cases. We have n minus 1, leave it exactly the same, and then n minus 1. Not only do we change it to a -2, we flip the sign and switch the sign. So flip the symbol and switch the sign. So if it was a negative number, it is now a positive number. If it was positive, it's now a negative. So now we just solve both parts. We would add 1, and we get n is less than 3. And if we add 1 here, we get n is greater than -1. So here's what we're talking about. Let's graph this. This is a and, less than, and. Here is 3, 0, -1. 1 says n is less than 3, open circle pointing that way. N is greater than -1, open circle pointing that way. They overlap, so that would be the graph of this inequality. Greater than. So greater, this time I have this part of greater highlighted or in capital letters. That's because it's going to end up being an or one. So again, write one of them exactly as it is and do the same n minus 1. I flip it and I switch the sign. Flip and switch. So how do we solve? We had 1 on both sides and I get n is greater than 3. Add 1 on both sides here. And I get n is less than -1. So this graph is going to look different than the other graph. Here is my 3, 0, -1. N is greater than 3 or less than -1. So it's an or. They do not touch anywhere. Let's see. This is greater than, so it should be an or, but I'm going to just break it up. That isn't really necessary to know as long as you can still solve them. One I write exactly the same. The other one, I flip it and switch the sign. You see that this side always stays exactly the same. I don't do anything to that side. So how do I solve this? Now I'm going to divide by 8. I get n is greater than or equal to 3. N divided by 8, excuse me. I get n is less than or equal to -3. And since it's an or, I should have done this on the last, excuse me. Since it's an or, I'm good. So n is greater than or equal to 3. And here's my -3, less than or equal to -3. It's a greater than, they do not touch. So I don't need to write it over. Here are my two answers along with their graph. When it's an and, I should write it together like we did a few days ago. So let's see if we get an and one. Less than, so this is going to be an and. We again write x plus 3 is less than 5 exactly as it is. And x plus 3 is flip it, switch the sign. Subtract 3, subtract 3. I get x is less than 2. Subtract 3, subtract 3. I get x is greater than -8. So I can write this in one equation. X is greater than -8. If I flip this one around and put the 2 here, this would happen. So I already have the x. then I'm going to put the 2. So 2 is greater than x, which is greater than -8. Or I could have written it -8 is less than x is less than 2. So that's two different ways it could be written. Both of the ways are just fine. If you notice the arrows or the signs all point at the x the way they're supposed to. So either one of those is right, but we write them together as 1. So again, just like the other day, I need to get this part by itself. So to do that, I'm going to divide by 2. I could have distributed, but I don't need to. So absolute value, actually I don't distribute in this case, I want to divide, is equal to 8. I don't know, I have an equation 1 again, but here, excuse me, is equal to 8 divided by 2, which is 4. Make my two cases, d plus 4 equals 4, d minus 4 equals, plus 4 equals -4. Subtract 4. D equals 0. Subtract 4. D equals -8. So those are my two answers. Let's try this one. This one, everything is in the absolute value, so I just can start by making my two cases right away. 2x plus 4 is greater than or equal to 5, and 2x plus 4 is, flip it and switch the sign, less than or equals to -5. I want to move everything away from my x's, so I subtract 4. 2x greater than or equal to 1. If I keep going on this one, divide by 2, I get x is greater than or equal to 1/2. All right, now let's try this one. You get 2x is less than or equal to -9. Divide by 2. X is less than or equal to -9 halves, which is -4 1/2 or 4.5. So if we are going to graph both of those, fractions are a little trickier to graph, but let's see. Here's 0. Here is 1/2 or 0.5. Here is -4.5. X is greater than or equal to 0.5. And x is less than or equal to -4.5. So that's an OR inequality. You should go ahead and try those two. Be careful on that first one because you probably don't have to go very far to solve it. And then your homework will be on Math Excel, and we'll do it tomorrow in class.